Okay.
All right, Dale.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dale Getto. I'm a retired urban educator. I began my career as a special education teacher with Capital Region BOCES at Giffen Elementary School in the south end of Albany, just retiring from the principalship at Albany High School. I'm currently on faculty at CASDA and will be the host of today's session. Students in the Struggle, Voicing on Police and Protest. CASDA in partnership with Common Thread Consulting that are here today, Alicia, Holt, and Damonni, Farley, and when the time comes, they will be introducing our student panel. But before I introduce today's facilitators, I'd like to just share with you who's in the room today. There are teachers, we are social workers, community members, board members, support staff, university faculty, building and district leaders, and of course, our panel of students. There are over 125 people signed up for this session today, and we hail from all over the map. We come from Wells, Argyle, Shen, and there are several of my former colleagues from Albany. Go Falcons. Your presence, in all seriousness, demonstrates a commitment to understanding the underlying issues of systemic racism and police violence. We know student voice and their experiences can provide us with insight and directions as we all create a vision for a more just future. You know, working at CASDA, I was thinking what to open up with today. Was it going to be a quote? Was it going to be a story? And before I talk about what this moment demands, I want to mention it was a few years back on December 7th, a day that we were unable at Albany High School to keep our faculty, our students, and staff free from harm. And at one point, we had to call the Albany County Sheriff along with the city police. They were in full riot gear in my center hallway. I just know once you call the police, you can't turn back. You lose total control and they take over. I look back today, riot police, 30 out of school suspension. It was a leadership failure of epic proportion on my part. But the healing began. We had to move forward the next day. We had faculty focus groups. We met with students and parents and started to pull ourselves back together. From a leader standpoint, it was really hard to hear, but we had to, we had to move and lead to a more inclusive school. So just a small story that reflection and listening can lead to a better place. But now a few quotes before I turn it over. I opened my email on yesterday morning, and I'm a member of the National Association of Secondary Principals. And the president and executive director wrote a letter to their members. And this is what they said. This moment in time calls on us to reject the complicit message of silence. This moment demands our outrage. This moment demands that we reaffirm our roles as champions of equity. This moment calls on us to loudly condemn not only overt racial violence, but also the less obvious structural racism that permeates every dimension of American life: economics, health, the environment, housing, and yes, education. This moment in time calls on us leaders to build our own cultural competence, to recognize and address the racial disparities in our discipline policies and our academic systems, and our use of school resource officers. It calls on us to lead conversations with all students and stakeholders that will build culturally responsive schools. These are difficult and challenging conversations, but we have to lead that dialogue in service to our schools and communities. Audience, I urge you to listen to our students here, to find your voice and to act. A couple of housekeeping moments. Our chat is turned off until the end of today's session, when we will turn it back on, and I'll remind you at the end, where we'll be looking for feedback, thoughts, and we'll collect that and share that back out with you. At this point in the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to the panel that will be hosted today by Alicia Holt and Damonni Farley. Alicia, Damonni, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dale. Sorry, just waiting for the truck to pass. So I want to say that to follow up on what Dale said, this is definitely a moment of reflection for everyone, but this is definitely a moment to center our students and the voices of our students. And that is the purpose and the premise for this time today. You may have noticed on our opening slide, we did have another student who was supposed to join us, but life happens, and unfortunately he was unable to. But we do hope to expand and continue this conversation over time so that we can hear from as many students as possible before we go back to school in the fall about their needs and what they are doing and what they see as important and vital for their success moving forward as we plan for exciting yet uncertain times. So I'm going to I'm going to quickly introduce the panelists, but Damonni is going to kind of do his own little intro and they'll introduce them. I will tell you a little bit that they are students who are committed to the struggle. They are students who are committed to balancing unjust systems. I also have a history in Albany. I also have a history in Schenectady, but today I'm representing Common Thread, and I can say from work in the community, these ladies are there, and they are speaking truth to power whenever they have an opportunity. Shemaya, if you want to wave, Shemaya is wrapping up her 10th grade year. She was a student of mine. She wrote an entire essay about why she should be able to wear headgear after I told her to take it off. That's a true story. And Lizzie is a young lady that I've gotten to know over the years, and she is wrapping up her junior year now. And they'll tell you more about themselves in a moment, but right now I'm going to turn it over to Damonni.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Damonni Farley. I am the founder of Common Thread Consulting. I also serve as a community outreach specialist for Schenectady City School District. Have a long-term history of social justice work here in the city of Schenectady and surrounding cities in the capital region. So I am extremely excited to be here today with some dynamic students. I'm going to tell you that I have the pleasure of working, had the pleasure of working with these students on social justice issues in the school system and in the community. And they are just amazing young people with so much to offer, and really are the people that give us hope for the future. Because when I was their age, you probably wouldn't see much glimmer if we were judging of the future. But when we look at these amazing students here that we got, I'm just extremely excited about that. So I guess I'll get right into the first question that we have, and for the students. And Shemaya, I think we'll start with you. And it is, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit why you chose to get involved in the Black Spring Uprising? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you.
That's all right. It's okay.
Hi everyone. My name is Shemaya Walker. As Ms. Holt said, I'm wrapping up my 10th grade year, and I decided to get involved because I feel like I know that I have a voice, and I know that it's easily heard when I speak. I've always had like an urge to speak my mind, especially about uncomfortable topics to people. I like making people feel uncomfortable or making people feel comfortable with the uncomfortable. This all started, I'd say, just about my 7th grade year, where I'd write poems about different issues that were going on in the world. The first time I wrote about a social justice issue was about the book, All American Boys. That's when I don't Miss Holt. I got you the next year, my fault. And then, as Miss Holt said, I wanted to wear my bandana in school because it was yellow and it matched my outfit. But because it wasn't appropriate at that time for the code of conduct, I was asked to take it off, and I wrote a whole essay about it because I didn't agree with that. Um, but that's a little bit about me. Um, so, give me 1 second.
So yeah, thank you for that. I just want to say, I think that's a really cool thing, that you have, Miss Holt here on the call, helping facilitate this conversation, and as a demonstration that we are all lifelong learners, even in the areas of equity, anti-racism, and cultural responsiveness. Kind of saying like, look, I met this dynamic young woman when I was enforcing a code of rule of the school that wasn't very culturally responsive, that could,
We could just
do
call it
something.
problematic.
Okay, all right.
It was problematic, and I was being problematic. And like to Dale's point, we can reflect and own that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I highlight that because we have a lot of educators here in the space, and when we do that, we permit them to do the same, right? So that's a really, really good thing. Okay, so we will move it over to Lizzie, and just so Lizzie, the question was, introduce yourself and explain a little bit about why are you involved in the Black Spring Uprising, Black Lives Matter?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Lizzie, and like Ms. Holt said, I'm a junior. I go to Schenectady, and I'm involved in multiple advocacy groups inside of the school, including Roots Club and Teen Advocacy Group, as well as another club called Patriot Pride Committee, which just is involved with improving the school community and atmosphere for the students. I got involved in this because when I was in 10th grade, it was the first time I ever had a teacher of color, and he structured his curriculum around talking about police brutality and the school to prison pipeline and a lot of stuff like that. And he started talking about people that were oppressed, and he talked about Sandra Bland, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, and we had like a whole unit on it. It was kind of like the whole year, but there was a specific unit that circled around that. And as you know, Eric Gardner, he was also in a chokehold, and he said like, I can't breathe. And then when I saw the George Floyd video, I was like, oh my God, it's the same thing. And it just brought back the same feelings and emotions that I had when we saw the video in class. So I've been going out to protest, to talk about it, and just posting stuff online and being a voice so that people know this is not something that just started right now, something that's happening for so long. And I was acknowledging it before then, but just to then in 10th grade to be able to acknowledge it then, Black Spring, Black Lives Matter movement.
I also want to, so just like Lizzie said, I'm also in a bunch of teen advocacy clubs. Well, I'm actually in teen advocacy group along with Lizzie, but I'm also in other clubs like Planned Parenthood, just making sure that kids inside the school have someone to talk to, whether it's about like STDs, abortions, or safe sex.
Thank you for that. So we have some very extremely busy young people. I believe, Alicia, you had the first question for the young people, right? Well, the second question.
The second question, yeah. All right. So Shemaya, we started with you, so I'm going to throw this one to Lizzie first. When we think about public schools and policing, we often have spaces where, especially where we live, there's a majority of Black and brown people, but those who are in leadership or those who are making the decisions are white people. How does that play out in what we see in our schools and in our communities today? Lizzie, I'll start with you.
I think in schools it's unrecognized, and because the majority is dominated by white people in our school district and in places of power, and because the students are minorities or people of color, that the teachers will try to translate what was learned. These teachers are coming from places like the suburbs or places that really didn't have POC. So they try to, I feel like the curriculum that they learn, they try to place it on us without acknowledging the fact that they do have, for example, like I've been in a situation where we were learning something and I just try to tell the teacher, like, that's not how I learned it, because I always try to do my outside research on stuff, because like I said, the curriculum is not taught to teach me, it's taught to teach a white kid, or try and place stuff on me so that I'm I don't know what the word is, but just try to change how I'm trying to view things. So I read up on stuff a lot, and I try to acknowledge to the teacher that this is how it actually was, and she was like, no, that's not how it was. And I feel like she was kind of deliberately, you need to look at it from an economical point of view instead of a moral point of view, just kind of telling me to shut up while we were having the discussions in the classroom. So I had went to an administrator, and the administrator was also, like I said, someone who was white, and they didn't really do anything about it. But, you know, like they write stuff down, but no actions are really taken. But then I had went to a teacher of color because, like, there's someone I can trust, someone I can rely on to actually do something about the situation, and something had been done, and they did go to the teacher personally and talk to the teacher about why it's degrading and makes the space unsafe for me in those classrooms when they try to hush me or just try to make me not talk about stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not coming up with the words, but hopefully you understand. But it's nice to have those teachers there who are able to have a voice for me when I don't have a voice for myself or can't get out what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Lizzie. Yeah, so Shemaya, same question for you. We are often in Black and brown spaces, but they're predominantly, the decisions are predominantly made by white people. How do we see that play out in both our schools and our community?
Okay, so I'd like to share a story. So last year, around the end of the year, I'd say like the end of May maybe, I was going to a study hall, and the teacher in that study hall, they kind of put themselves inside of my conversation. So I was talking with another student, and I was basically telling the other student about the work that we'd recently done on a trip at NYU, which Lizzie was also on that trip. And I was talking about the disproportionality inside of schools, and he cut me off. Well, the teacher cut me off, and then go on to say that there's basically no such thing as systematic oppression, and there's just so much. It's confidential, so I don't want to say anything that'll say who it is, but basically after that happened, the first thing I did was go to a Black administrator, because I knew that that person would take the right steps to make sure that that teacher was reprimanded and action was taken. However, I feel like if I would have went to someone else, they would have kind of they would have understood, but they would have never did much. You know, like they would have never made sure that each action was foreseen. And I feel like in schools, a lot of times students ask for empathy. They they need someone who understands what they go through. They need someone who can be culturally responsive and equitable to their needs. And if you don't have empathy, then you can't do neither of those things. So what I will be looking for in this upcoming year, and what most students and all students will be looking for, is empathy from teachers, staffs, and administrators. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You know, that's a pretty powerful thing to have, is empathy. And it's also one of those things that, as adults, sometimes I think we give ourselves a lot more credit than we deserve in that category, right? Like that might be something that we don't necessarily see ourselves the best way. We think that, we are, we do have empathy for our students, but sometimes we don't. And I think that's kind of a perfect segue into the next question, because the scenario that you, the story that you just kind of gave us, the example, dealt with, systemic racism. You were talking about Black Lives Matter. I know a little bit about that story because I was involved myself to a certain extent. And these are very politically charged things. What do you say, Shemaya, what do you say to teachers who kind of take on the thought of that these are very politically driven, politically charged issues, and school isn't a place for such issues to be discussed?
Okay, I'm unmuted. I feel like one of the first things I'd say is that school is all about politics to me, because it's about political and economical differences. If there was no politics, then there would be no school system. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't exist. That's how we get certain funding. That's how certain things are allowed to happen in school. So I'd probably say to that teacher, like, why shouldn't my opinion, or why shouldn't how I feel matter because you feel like it's too political? Um, I don't know how I'd go about that, because there's several different things that pop in my head. And there was one thing that I thought about saying, and I just feel like, nah, I wouldn't even say that. Like, I'd probably just dismiss myself at that moment, because that wouldn't be someone that I want to continue talking.
Thank you for that. To all the educators, that are listening right now, that last part is very significant. I want to highlight that. But, saying that, I was thinking of some things to say, but I probably would just remove myself. And I think that that's something that a lot of our students tend to do when they feel that, the conversations, the curriculum isn't for us, right? We kind of disengage because that's the message that we're being sent. So Lizzie, same question to you. Like, what would you say to this teacher, the educator, the adult in the building that's concerned that the topics, stances, conversations, etc., are too politically charged and school isn't the place for that?
I would ask the teacher, when are we supposed to be political? Like, when outside of school are we supposed to be political? I feel like it's the same thing. Like, people say, oh, when you enter the real world, well, like, school is the real world. And just as, like, when do we have these political conversations? Jemima was talking about how, like, school is built off of politics, and I just want to say school is built off of the system. So when, like, you're telling kids, oh, don't be political, don't do this, is usually most of the time they're only talking to the students of color, and when they're addressing a situation that is offending them or oppressing them. I feel like there's a difference between being oppressed and talking about politics, and teachers tend to forget that, so that this space is uncomfortable. But when you're talking about those things, that's what, I don't know, is my audio messed up? I'm sorry. Is it messed up? Is my audio messed up? Oh, sorry. But like, when people are talking about those things inside of the classrooms, it's most of the time that they're trying to protect their white students, so that the white students don't feel uncomfortable so that they don't feel uncomfortable in those situations. So I feel like they need to acknowledge the fact that school is built off of, like, those systems that Jemima was kind of touching upon, and that when you're telling a student that they're being political, you need to think about where is the student being political, and how can you change it, or how can they reword with still getting their point across. Because when you tell a student, like Shemaya was just saying, she wouldn't really know what to say. When you tell a student that this isn't the time to be political, like where in the sentence or where in what they said can you pull out those pieces to understand how they were feeling in the situation?
Thank you for that. Very powerful answer as well. Alicia?
So I want to follow up on that idea. So, I want to first thank you all for your experiences, because what you talked about previously are things that have been happening for a long time, and they're not only limited to you, but it's a common experience that students face, or people of color in majority white environments face. That sense of, I'm not going to say something because I don't think it's going to be received, or I don't think I'm going to be heard, or I don't think I'm going to be believed. So I just want to thank you, because I know it's not easy to talk about those things. But let's think for a moment about a school that is truly student-centered, a school where you feel completely comfortable, you feel affirmed, you feel valued, you don't have any questions going on in the back of your head about if this is going to be the right or wrong thing, or how people are going to feel about it. What does that school look like? Like, what are the things that you hear? What does it sound like? What are teachers saying? What are students saying? What does that school feel like whenever we go back? And I'm gonna, Shemaya has her hand up, so I'll shoot it over to Shemaya.
Well, first, I want to say that it reminds me of my school, Schenectady High School, because for the most part, it's the student's voice that counts. And they take that into consideration a lot of the time. I feel like in order for a student's voice to truly be heard, students need to be put in a position of power. There need to be students on the Board of Education. I mean, we have the student Board of Education. At least, well, we tried to start that, but I feel like that needs to be a real thing. That needs to be something that happens. We need to be at meetings. We need to be involved in faculty meetings, because I feel like if you can say that you're listening to a student, but you can hear what a student's saying, but you can not really. I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied because I'm thinking about other stuff. We never really know if you're really listening until you show an action. So if you're not doing anything to show that our voice matters, then how would we ever know that our voice matters? You understand where I'm coming from? So like at the protest, right? We had cops kneel for us, right? That showed, okay, yeah, it mattered. They did that. But if they don't continue to act on the things that they promised, then it won't mean anything. It wouldn't matter that they kneeled with us. It wouldn't matter that they walked with us, because they did the complete opposite after hearing how we felt.
Truer words have never been spoken. Lizzie, I'm gonna shoot that over to you. What does a student-centered school, what does it sound like? What do you hear? What does it feel like when you are walking in those classes and in those spaces?
I completely agree with what Shemaya had just said, but there's like when she was talking about how our school, like I agree to disagree, because I feel like our school likes to paint the picture of the fact that we have student voice and stuff like that, but I feel like she said, we're not involved in those rooms, we're not allowed in those spaces. Some of the stuff we say, it's taken and nothing's done with it. I feel like if they had like step plans, like this is how, when this is going to go down, this is when this is going to go down, and assured us that stuff would actually change, instead of I don't want to say like plastering our faces everywhere, because like this is important. These conversations are important, but I would say like in other spaces, I feel like sometimes our voices aren't heard, and stuff like that needs to change. And I think starting with the student school board, or having some faculty meetings, I know those are like for you guys and stuff like that, but just asking the students questions when the superintendent comes to the school, maybe they can have a student representative that they're talking to about the issues that are going on in the school. I think we do a lot of stuff that the admin is doing in our school, but at the same time, there needs to be conversations where we want to do what we want to do. I'm not saying I disagree with the stuff that we're doing, and I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about this, but I'm talking about other stuff outside of this that students should be assured that their voice is going to be heard at the same time that we're working on stuff outside, because there's other ideas and other things that need to happen. But just setting up those plans, like when is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? Is really assuring to me and makes me feel confident that there's going to be a change that happens.
Go ahead, Jemiah.
As Lizzie was talking, and I completely agree with her, I started to feel like there was a time when we had a problem where Black and brown students were being suspended way more than the students of different ethnic backgrounds. And I feel like in order to ensure that each student is like being treated fairly when they're going through the suspension process, I feel like there should be a student, like there should be students or a student that's involved in that, because a lot of times students and adults see things differently. So the way an adult may see a situation, they may see it as a level 3 suspension and really or offense, and it could really be a 1 or a 2. You understand what I'm saying? So I feel like adults see things as problematic. They see students as problematic instead of having empathy for them.
So I kind of want to go back to so Shemai, you talked about the adults and how they see students, and in our last question we kind of said like there's reasons why these things, the protests right now, these conversations are happening, and so when we think about moving forward, we kind of really want to address some of those systemic reasons or the systemic origins that may lead to disproportionality in schools, or it may lead to over incarceration of Black and brown people. So a lot of times we talk about the ideas of abolishing systems that cause harm and that predominantly cause harm to Black and brown people. Or we talk about decolonizing spaces where we have a very wide gap between the people who participate in a space and then the people who lead a space. So I want for both of you, and you can decide who's going to jump in first, but what does safety mean in a society where the police system as it currently exists has been abolished and education has been decolonized and is owned by the people who are going to consume it, or you, the students? What does safety mean in that context?
So the first thing I thought about when you said what does safety look like in the outside world, and the first thing that came to my head was being white. That came to my head because there are certain worries that Black and brown people have, that a white person just does not have. You understand? So I feel like safety is kind of taken away that that differentiation between a Black and brown student and a white student, a Caucasian student, because if you ever go inside of a classroom, right, an honors classroom, an IB classroom, you may see some Black students, but predominantly white students in that classroom. And I feel like that's all a part of the system, because when you're in lower grades, so like 8th grade, I'm sorry, my phone's down on push charger. So in 8th grade, this is a short story. I wanted to be in this program called Smart Transfer, and I was in an honors class, So I didn't see why I wouldn't be in that program. And I was immediately shot down and told that if I joined that program, I wouldn't be able to do sports. Now, the person who told me this knew that that was my thing. Sports was my thing. I wanted to be in any sport that I knew how to play, any sport that I thought would be easy to learn. So that automatically took that idea of being in this program out of my head until I got to ninth grade and it was too late, and I learned that that wasn't true at all. That all I had to do to be in that program was write an acceptable essay to get in. And I felt like that was already systematic oppression, because it was offered to every student that she felt that the teacher felt would be good for that position. And all of them were white. All of them were the people who spoke up most in classrooms because those were the people that she picked on. So, damn, what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I got away from. Can you repeat the question, please?
No worries. You show up in this space authentic. So, definitely. It's all right. Take your time.
I felt like you were getting there, because the one part was about decolonizing. So you were saying that there were a certain group of students who were always picked on, and then linking it to safety. So I wonder if, some students just naturally feel safer because they're ones that are able to make those connections with teachers. And if, that's part of what we think of physical safety, but psychological safety also. But yeah, no, definitely continue.
Okay, so thank you for that, Ms. Holt, because it started to come back in my head as you were saying that. I feel like when a kid feels like, it's like when you're in class, right, and you don't know the answer, but the teacher picks on you, knowing that you may not know the answer, like it's a good percentage that you don't. And you're stuck in class and you're like, well, what do I say? And now you're trying to think of things to say, or you start something so that way you can either get kicked out of class or just have a reason not to answer that question or not to read that sentence or not to read that book. That's unsafe, because now you feel like you're being a target. Like you're targeted in that class. You're targeted by your teacher. You're looked at by your peers as this person, and eventually it'll get to you and it'll stop you from probably coming to school or even coming to that class because you no longer feel safe there. I feel like teachers should take that into consideration, that don't call on a kid unless a kid wants to be called on. Don't Make sure that you have empathy for that kid. You understand? Now I'm shying away from it, but it's all there. I'm sorry. I'm planning stuff, so everything's just in my head right now. Lizzie?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yep. So the question is, what does safety mean in a society where the police system as it currently exists is abolished and education has been decolonized?
I think that Shamaya was hitting on multiple points, but I want to address like one thing she was talking about, how like a student walking into a classroom, how they want to feel comfortable in the classroom and safe in those spaces. And I think, for example, like she was saying, how the teacher will pick on the kid, or let's say this kid who is getting suspended comes back and he's like, oh, you're finally here, stuff like that. Like dismantling stuff like that and making the space safer. So instead of asking the kid, because classes are different and kids get suspended for different reasons. For example, if the kid walked in and they were suspended, maybe offering that kid resources for all the work that they missed because suspension, you're missing work, you're missing class time, or talking to the kid about like what's going on, how can you help them, ways you can reach out, is there someone they want to talk to. I know I have some teachers who, if I'm having a bad day or something like that, they'll write me a pass to a teacher I feel comfortable with or someone I want to talk to. Having ways like that, making the kid feel safe or welcome in the classroom, but safe in the school at the same time. So if you're that teacher, if you're that person that they want to talk to, having available lunches open for them, asking them how their day was. I think a lot of the time teachers think that they're just supposed to say, oh, what's going on at home, but a lot of kids don't want to talk to them, or that can be a trigger point for them in the classroom or even in the space that you're working with them in. I think working your way up to building the relationship with the kid after we dismantle these systems is a great way to start making the classroom feel safer for them and not making them feel like an outcast, because kids have so much stuff going on at home, especially, or kids have different ways to act or react to this whole situation. So reaching out to the student and making them feel welcome and not like an outsider in your classroom is an important way to making the environment feel safe. I don't know if that answered your question.
I want to add on to what Lizzie said about also, I guess, her adding on to what I said. But instead of telling a student when they walk inside the classroom, oh, you're finally here, or oh, you're late again, or I feel like you should be asking them, like, or be saying, I'm glad that you're here. You know, like, turn that easily negative situation into a positive automatically. As soon as you see the kid, I'm glad to see you today. I'm glad you showed up. Because now the kid is starting to think, like, wow, okay, I'm here. Like, and it's appreciated. You know, you're not getting on my back, because I have been that kid who has been late to school first period. And the teacher's like, oh, wow, you're late again. And it's like, well, you know what? You didn't drive me to school. So I automatically get defensive instead of trying to understand, like, yeah, I've been late a couple times. I should start trying to get here earlier. That's the last thing that I think about. Sorry, I was getting hung up on that. Okay, yeah, that's what I want to add. I'm sorry. I started
Okay, so no, a lot of really powerful points were made. So every now and then, and things like this, I like to do what I call as a checkpoint. It's just kind of like where we're talking to everyone, our audience. And at this checkpoint, I just want to remind people that when we are asking students to share their stories, to share their expertise, if you will, their expertise comes from a lot of personal experiences. And, you know, the way we honor that is by understanding it comes at a cost. There's a lot, you hear our students trying to negotiate, want to tell stories, want to, you know, respect to confidentiality, but really want to highlight their experiences to help inform us as educators. So the way we honor that, and really important to do, is to take this information and start to ask ourselves these questions. You know, how do I make, you know, what are my actionable steps to either prevent, you know, reduce the likelihood of some of the experiences that these students are sharing with us, or what do I need to do less of to reduce the likelihood, or what should I be doing more of, you know, to kind of reinforce some of the positive experiences that students have shared. So that's just a checkpoint for everyone that's watching and joining with us. Make sure that we're honoring these students' stories by you know, making some action, being planful and intentional about some action steps to them. So, you know, kind of a more general question, and do with it what you will. Lizzie, I'm going to start with you. You know, all the things that we have going on in the news, you know, and especially with COVID-19 disproportionately impacting communities of color, systemic racism at the forefront of everyone's brain right now, because it's been around forever. It's just, you know, the recent events with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd have kept it in front of us here. What are some of the lessons that educators can learn from this moment? Answer that any way you want. What do they need to learn from this moment, or what are some of the things that they need to be doing to kind of make the educational experience better? Again, answer how you like.
I think the first thing that teachers need to be doing is addressing what's going on. I think too many teachers are, I'm not saying that you don't have to stop hanging out at work, but I think you need to address what's going on, because I know a lot of the times if we were in school, we need to imagine what it would look like if we were in school. On today, try and just acknowledge the fact. I know Schenectady would talk about it, or we would have a protest or something. The students would organize a protest. I think so many teachers that are not acknowledging it are just hiding behind the keyboard and just adding to the side of the oppressor by just not acknowledging the fact or making the students feel unheard. Or if you have Google Meet with your students, just acknowledging it there or trying to say, how do you feel about the whole situation without making the student feel bad about the situation, because it's, like I said, our school is filled with majority white teachers, and I wouldn't want to hear my teacher trying to tell Black people how to protest or act in times like these. So being cautious of what you're saying, but at the same time still being able to address the issue. We see so many people, like, I'm not trying to compare here, but so many celebrities right now talking about what's going on and using their words cautiously, but still addressing the issue. I feel like, not to say the teachers are celebrities, but if you're in such a high position right now, you should be able to talk about these things with your students and address what's going on to, like the last question was saying, make them feel safe. Everybody with anything, even if you don't have a phone, to be knowing what's going on, because there's so many protests outside, radios, anything to inform yourself about what's going on, and then find a way to connect with your students. Maybe it could be a do now, a bell ringer, talk about the case or what students want to do. Have a little side project on the side to make the students feel that they're heard in times like these. And I don't know, I feel like so many times it's pushed away by teachers because they don't want to talk about it, and it's so easy for them to not talk about it in times like these, but it's something that needs to be talked about. And if you're not talking about it in times like these, it's so obvious that you're not talking about it in times like these. I have so many friends who are white, who are not talking about it, but when I advocate in school, which I do all the time, they're like, oh my God, Lizzie, oh my God, yay, 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 which for so many other stuff, but what about now? What are you doing right now in this moment to address the issue?
Wow. So, I mean, a lot said there. I do want to highlight one part I think was really powerful. You said, if teachers are not speaking about, and I want to say educators, right? I don't want to, I say educators because we all are educators in our own right. So it's not just teachers, administrators, even our facility workers. I think that we all have a role in this. But something you said was really powerful. You said, if they're being silent or hiding behind a keyboard, I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, is like you're siding with the oppressor. And I think that is something that has been brought to the forefront that might be a little different, is that if you don't address this issue, your silence is violence. Your silence, there's no neutral place. There's no fence to sit on here. Either you need to be addressing the issue or you're not. And if you're not, then you're contributing to the problem. Shamaya, what are some of the lessons that teachers can learn from this moment? And what are some of the things that they need to keep in mind? However you would like.
I feel like teachers right now is the perfect opportunity for teachers, educators, especially white educators, to connect with their Black and brown students. I say that because a lot of times teachers aren't able to have certain conversations with their students because it's just not always possible, or they just don't connect the way they should. Oh shoot, sorry, my Chromebook almost, my heart dropped. I feel like at this moment, educators should acknowledge what's going on, and like Lizzie said, speak to your students about it as much as possible, because right now we need you to be that part of our support system. We need to know that you are on our side and that you see that there is something wrong. And if you silence yourself to the violence, then you're just as bad as as oppressors. So I feel like teachers, they need to read up on what's going on, especially if there's some teachers that know what's going on but don't really know what's going on. Maybe they don't have news, or they just aren't aware of everything that's going on and all of the steps. I feel like there should be teachers out there protesting with us and marching with us, getting in contact with us, seeing what's going on, like Miss Weigel, right? Or like Miss Holt Riley, like Damonni. I've seen you guys at protests, standing along with your students, showing your face, making it known that you are there, because that's exactly what we need. We need to know that there are teachers and administrators and educators on our side in this. And as there hasn't, I don't know if there's any more protests that's going to be related to Black Lives Matter per se, but there are going to be more events where teachers should show their faces and make it known that they're here to support their students.
I just want to add to what Shemaya said, sorry, real quick. Even if you can't go to a protest as an educator, post some protests. There's this one in Clifton Park, there's this one in Schenectady, there's this one in Troy. Post some petitions that people can sign, post some donation pages, something like that, a link to there's blacklivesmatter.park-.com. Post that on your Google Classroom, something like that, so resources that students can't be there physically, try to be there virtually.
Thank you for that. From my lens as, you know, the community outreach specialist and doing a lot of PDs on community engagement, we saw, due to COVID-19, we saw some really cool things happen in our communities with our educators. I mean, there were a lot of, you know, delivering of needed technology. There was like the parades and things like that. So as I'm talking with my colleagues, and I'm really, really proud of some of the things that were done, it was apparent to me that, you know, some of our colleagues have been working in the district for a long time, but the parade was the first time that they were actually in the neighborhood that the students lived in. So I think that as much as I'm excited about that, and I think that that's a great thing, there's a moment for us to learn about, like, we don't want to wait until it's something, you know, till we're actually in a crisis, you know, to enter in the spaces that our students reside in. I think that that was really, really a powerful kind of an aha moment for me. And I think I hear that when you're saying, like, show up. And there's different ways they show up, you know, if not to protest, there's a way to show up on your social media, but to stand up and be counted. And that's really important to students. Thank you. Thank you guys for that insight. Alicia?
All right, so we're kind of going to wrap all of this up. And so over the course of this conversation, both Shemaya and Lizzie have kind of talked about words aren't enough. We definitely need to back those actions up with words. And so as we close this conversation, I kind of want to hear from Lizzie and Shemaya about what are some of the actions that go beyond symbolic gestures. So Shemaya, you had mentioned earlier, like, yeah, it's great that we asked the police to take a knee, and that they did in solidarity to the issues that were being raised. And we've seen a lot of symbolic gestures lately. What should people do? What should educators do to ensure that your voices aren't just being heard to be heard, but that your voices, student voices, the people who this education is here to serve, your voices are being centered, they're being amplified, and they're being acted upon? What are some of those things that educators on this call right now should walk away knowing this is what's really going to help validate my Black and Brown students, not only in this moment, but moving forward? Let's start with Lizzie.
I think moving forward, just to validate everybody's things and make a valuable use of our time, having conversations with students. I don't know, I feel like it's just like a piggyback of what we've said this whole time. Like, have those conversations with your students. If you're not having those conversations with your students, or being a part of conversations, or finding ways like incorporating student voice in the classroom. Maybe on a Friday, you have a day where students can share out what they've learned throughout the week or something that's going on. That's important. I know some teachers have office hours, like during study hall, something like that. Encourage your students to come, say, or on a sticky note on the do now today. What did you learn over the weekend? What's going on in the world today? What is important to you? And then maybe you read out those sticky notes if they want you to read them out, or they can be anonymous or something like that. But just have the students' voices heard inside the classroom, so you're acknowledging what's going on in the world today and what's going on in the classroom. Or maybe have your students learn something over the weekend. So it's required that a student bring something that that they saw in the media, saw on Twitter, saw on the news, and they bring it to the classroom. And then after that you sit down and you be like, how did this affect you? Move forward, like not just taking a paper and reading it out loud, but move forward past the step. How did this affect you? How did this make you feel? So that it just keeps building and building and building, so that when times like this, like Damonni was just talking about, when times like this come, this isn't the only time that we're talking about stuff. This was going on way before then. You're talking about stuff continuously, and even if we're past this, when we move past this, you're still talking about these issues. They're still ongoing. They don't just stop over the protest. I know I saw something on Twitter the other day, and it said that Black Lives Matter isn't a spirit week. It didn't just end after the 7 days. It doesn't just end after the protest. It keeps going on after this. It will keep going on for generations and generations, because it's been going on for 400 years. And this isn't the only, I know I wasn't acknowledging it the other day. I've been acknowledging it for so long. And I think teachers need to acknowledge it. Educators, sorry.
I just want to jump in and say Lizzie was spitting bars right there, like fact after fact after fact.
Bars. Black Lives Matter isn't a spirit week. Bars.
Bars.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear what you were saying, Lizzie, just because there's so much going on in my background that I just had to kind of get it to be more quieter. Can you please repeat the question? I'm sorry, I just wasn't able to hear.
Yep, so the question is, so we've seen a lot of symbolic gestures. What should people and what should educators do to ensure that your voices are not just heard to be heard, but they are centered, amplified, and acted upon moving forward?
I feel like students should be at the front line. As I said before, students should have more roles, and
Shemaya, you got really low. I don't know if your speaker is down or covered.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I feel like students should be at the front line. They should be in those roles and in those rooms that we often get kicked out of and get ignored or shy away from. I feel like student voice should always be about student voice. That should be the main goal. That should be what's acted off of, is student voice. And then if need be, then there should be an educator's voice after that. I feel like students should be in charge of a lot of things, because after all, it's their school. You know, if there was no students in a school, then you would not have a school. You would have no one to educate. So I just feel like if you're going to work for students, you also need students to be by your side. You can't just feel like you're the superior to them. You need to show them empathy. You need to let them know that their voices are heard, even if they say something one day. Even if you probably are not going to remember it, write it down as soon as they say it. If they hit a key point, and then you reference that later on or at a different time, because it'll make that student feel like, oh, I was heard. You know, like you understood where I was coming from, and you understood it enough to remember it or to reference it. Listen to your students.
Thank
Can
you.
y'all stop making so?
Thank you, Shemaya. Go ahead, Damonni.
Oh, no. No, you go ahead, Alicia. I was gonna respond to that. Yep.
Nope, I was just thanking Shemaya for her response, so you got it.
Cool. So I'm hearing a lot about student voice, and again, you know, I want to tie it to some actionable things. You know, so the questions, a lot of this work for our educators is about asking the right questions. We on this panel, including our students, we don't have all the answers, so you really want to be asking yourself the right questions, such as like, you know, what are our policies? You know, what are our policies in our school building that, you know, we need to look at? Do we need to look at our code of conduct to see, like Shemaya's example of, you know, wearing a headband or bandana, you know, is that going to disproportionately impact students of color? You know, what are the what's the cultural impact of these rules that we have? We're approaching a time soon where all of our teachers are going to come back into buildings and design their classrooms a lot of times out of their own pocket. When they are on their vacation, they're going to spend their time and money to come to create these beautiful design classrooms for our students to walk into. Maybe we think about that a little bit differently this year. We welcome students in and then we say, help me create this space that is inclusive to you. So just a couple things, a couple suggestions that kind of piggyback off what our students were saying. Alicia.
Damonni, I have to be honest. I was trying to answer a question and I missed the question. I'm sorry.
No. I was just kind of pulling together some of the thoughts of our students and thinking about where we're at educators right now. What are some of the things that we're thinking about? Code of conduct, classroom design, and stuff like that. Just, asking ourselves the right questions in this moment so we can, make sure that we're doing, that we make sure that we are actionizing, if you will, some of our thoughts here from our students. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the biggest question is where is the harm the greatest? Where are we harming our students? And I think everybody has to individually assess that for their space. Whether that's if you're in the district office, if you're in building leadership, if you're in the classroom, where's the greatest harm occurring? And then once we see where that harm is occurring, then what do we do to begin to dismantle that harm? I never like the term disrupt because I'm like, you can disrupt or interrupt something and then it can start again. So if we notice that there are areas where there's a lot of harm, then what do we do to dismantle that system completely and then put something in that space that is healing and affirming and is going to build students? So where's the harm? I think that's my number one point question going into whatever we go into in the fall.
So at this point, again, thank you so much for our students and everyone that was listening and joined us. I'm going to kick it over to Dale, and I believe Dale's going to kind of close us out with a quote.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Damonni.
Oh.
It's a quote from James Baldwin. I had another one planned, but I just want to quote the students that we had in the room and then remind everybody that we're going to open the chat box for about the next 10 minutes for people's comments, for people's feedback. But not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. I also heard that from our participants, we know you're listening when you act. We know you're listening when you act. I heard plan with students. I know that we're doing work when we open up. What is 2021 school year going to look like? Invite students to the table now. I heard them say they want to come. And then finally, I heard that it's easy not to talk about this. It's easy not to talk about this, but to really ask our students, what are they doing now? I had one piece, so we're gonna open up the chat box right now. And I think that Lizzie, you wanted to say something before we leave the space. I think I saw a message.
Yeah, there was a question around like if the student
Hold on, I can't hear you, Lizzie. I don't know if you have some interference, so can we mute? You're not talking.
You have gang affiliations. At that point, if you had gang affiliations in the building, sorry, I'm gonna say that for the gang affiliation question where it was talking about the headbands, how you address it when it's gang affiliation, I was gonna say at that point it's not really student what is going on at home. I think too many times when educators, they just tell the student to remove the headwear or stop wearing this or don't do that, instead of addressing what's the issue at hand. You're like, it's like when the people are talking about the buildings right now, like, oh, the buildings are getting torn down. But why are the buildings getting torn down? Why are people are protesting for a reason? people are getting killed out here. And if people are wearing the bandanas and it's with gang affiliation, at that point, you shouldn't be worrying about the bandana. You should be worrying about the student and what's going on at home, because these are 14, 15, 16-year-olds at home, and making it about the bandana and telling them to take off the bandana is not addressing any of the issues with the gang affiliation at that point. So I just wanted to say that with that question.
Yes, Lizzie. I love that.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, for that clarification.
So I just have to say something. I'm not sure that the chat is open because I did a master setting in the back end on the Zoom website and not in this meeting. But if you would like to leave your reflections in the form of the question and answer box, we can get that there. If you have any reflections or thoughts, if you want to leave them in the Q&A box, definitely be appreciated. Sorry, it's still a technical thing. Go back to you, Dale.
All right, thank you, Jerome. I think we're going to conclude today's presentation right here. I do want to say we've been working with a colleague, Mike Piper. We're putting together some resources that teachers can access. We're going to put a page together, and we'll be back. Lizzie, Shemaya, I hope you return. We're going to be talking about instruction. We're going to be talking about curriculum, and keeping the student voice as the expert in the front of all conversations. With this, I want to say goodbye to everybody. I would like to thank you all for coming. I know that school is almost out in a week, whatever that means, and that you care about this issue and that you care about our community and our students. And with that, I want to say thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody.